What if genius wasn't lightning from the sky, but a storm you build, brick by brick, inside your mind? What if Albert Einstein wasn't born a miracle, but made himself into one? What if he didn't arrive as a thinker, but grew into a force by refusing to be defined by systems built to measure the ordinary? What if as a child he sat silent, not because he lacked words, but because the language of the world was too small for the size of his imagination? What if, while the world looked at facts, he stared at possibilities? What if his teachers were never wrong about his grades, but wrong about what grades meant? What if they saw failure, but missed the formula being written in his soul? What if that quiet boy struggling in class was actually rehearsing revolutions? What if every moment he was misunderstood only multiplied his determination? What if rejection wasn't the end, but the invitation to go deeper and deeper into the parts of himself others were too afraid to explore? What if he realized that the rules were suggestions and questions, were weapons and silence was his shield, while he forged something bigger than a career? What if genius isn't knowing all the answers, but daring to chase better questions? What if Einstein's real brilliance was that he stopped asking the world for directions and instead asked the universe for truth? What if he got quiet enough to hear his own mind calculate what reality could become if he never accepted the limitations others blindly obeyed? What if the reason he saw the speed of light wasn't because he read about it, but because he imagined himself riding it? What if that single idea changed time forever because he never let the boundaries of education limit the acceleration of imagination? What if every no he heard only meant not yet? What if he never needed external approval because his internal fire was already a furnace melting mediocrity and bending time into truth? What if every law he discovered wasn't just physics, but philosophy? What if relativity was his message to you that time bends for those who move different, that gravity submits to vision, and that space itself rearranges when you show up with obsessions so strong the universe has to adjust? What if E equals MC squared isn't just mass and energy, but a declaration that everything is everything, that matter becomes movement, and movement becomes meaning, and meaning becomes memory, and memory becomes legacy? What if that formula lives in you too, waiting not to be solved, but activated? What if the same fire that lit his soul is whispering in yours, telling you you don't need to be born a genius to reshape your galaxy? You just need relentless curiosity, because genius isn't about speed, it's about focus. And focus isn't something you find, it's something you build. Every time you turn off the noise and ask yourself, what am I really here to see? What if Einstein's real power wasn't what he knew, but what he pursued and how deeply he chased it? What if he wasn't chasing fame, but freedom, the freedom to live in a universe unchained by fear, tradition, or average thought? What if that's the reason he didn't dress like others? Because he wasn't there to impress, he was there to disrupt. What if he walked slowly, not because he was weak, but because his mind was moving at light speed through dimensions others couldn't see? What if you're not too late to be great? What if your difference is your dimension? What if your confusion is a prelude to your clarity? What if your breakdown is your breakthrough, coded in struggle, waiting to be released by decision? What if Einstein's gift was his refusal to accept how things are and his devotion to how things could be? What if he didn't solve the universe, but solved himself, and in doing so, decoded the cosmos? And what if the greatest mind of the last century is still echoing now through your own thoughts, asking you, are you bold enough to ask your own questions? Are you brave enough to reject the obvious? Are you disciplined enough to chase an idea for years, even when no one believes in it? Not your parents, not your friends, not your teachers, not your world. What if genius isn't lonely because it's special, but because it's early? Early to ideas that don't exist yet. Early to realities others call crazy. Early to visions that make sense only after you build them. What if you're not behind, but ahead, and that's why you feel different? Because you're already walking through doors others haven't noticed. What if genius is forged in the fire of daily rejection and refined in the furnace of inner belief? What if it's not something you have, but something you do? And what if the genius you seek in history is just a mirror showing you what happens when curiosity becomes obsession, and obsession becomes discipline, and discipline becomes destiny? What if the story of Albert Einstein isn't about science at all, but about the soul? What if the story is really about a boy who never fit in, but fit perfectly into the future? What if your pain isn't the end of your story, but the beginning of your purpose? What if everything you are right now, all the chaos, confusion, failure, and frustration is raw data, waiting for your mind to process it into something never seen before? What if the future isn't built by the best test takers, but by the ones who dare to test new ideas? What if your next idea doesn't just change your life, it changes life for all of us? What if the most powerful force in the universe isn't gravity or time or matter, but human thought? And what if that thought becomes a wave, and that wave becomes a movement, and that movement becomes a moment, and that moment is now? And the next Einstein isn't coming from another planet. The next Einstein is someone who hears this and doesn't just feel inspired, but activated, because they realize that greatness is never found in comfort. It's born in conflict. And if you're in conflict right now, you're closer than you think. What if today is the day you stop trying to be accepted and start trying to be exceptional? Go get it. Time wasn't your enemy, but your mirror. What if the ticking clock wasn't counting down, but counting up, waiting for you to realize that every second is a seed waiting to be turned into a storm? What if Albert Einstein didn't chase time, but rewrote it? What if he looked at the ticking clock not with fear, but with fury and fascination? What if he asked not how time moves, but how we move through it? What if the secret wasn't speed, but depth? What if 1 second with full focus is worth more than a year of distraction? What if Einstein's obsession with time wasn't about knowing when, but about knowing why? What if every second is a portal, and most people sleepwalk through it? What if genius is waking up? What if while the world was obsessed with clocks and calendars, Einstein stared into the soul of the universe and whispered, "I will not obey your time. I will bend it to truth"? What if he didn't live in time, but through it and beyond it? What if that's the reason he wasn't in a rush? Because he was moving through dimensions the rest of us haven't named yet. What if you've been trained to fear time, to race it, to run from it, to feel like it's slipping away? But what if time is waiting for you to show up fully? What if time bends for the brave? What if Einstein discovered relativity not because he was a genius, but because he never accepted the ordinary? What if every second he studied wasn't about minutes or math, but about meaning? What if he asked the question we all avoid? What is this moment worth if I give it everything? What if time doesn't shape us? We shape time. What if he saw time not as linear, but layered? What if while others were looking forward or backward, he was diving inward? What if the reason he found what others couldn't is because he wasn't distracted by how things looked? He was obsessed with how things were. What if genius is looking deeper, not wider? What if time is the most abundant thing in the universe, but the rarest thing in the human heart? Because we never decide to own it. What if you could take back time, not by changing the past, but by changing your presence? What if Einstein's biggest breakthrough wasn't relativity? It was realizing that the present is more powerful than any prediction. What if, while others feared death, he feared wasted potential? What if every hour you've hated, every minute you've doubted, every second you've feared is still with you right now, waiting to be rewritten by who you become? What if your memories aren't fixed, but flexible, and your identity isn't a file, but a frequency waiting to be upgraded? What if Einstein tapped into something older than time itself, the eternal now, the infinite moment, the place where miracles grow from decisions? What if that's why he didn't chase wealth? Because his wealth was wisdom, and his currency was clarity. What if you don't need more hours? You need more intensity. What if every hour you give your whole soul to becomes an hour multiplied across dimensions? What if time expands when you contract your focus? What if you are not running out of time, you're running from it, and all it wants is for you to return and declare, I am not a victim of time, I am its author. What if the reason you feel behind is because you were never meant to be on their schedule? What if you are on divine time, built different, for a reason, waiting for the second your soul decides to activate? What if Einstein didn't beat the system? He walked away from it and built a new one from thought. What if time is not the clock? It's the content of your consciousness, the energy you bring, story you tell, the impact you decide to make. What if one moment can shake a generation and one life can bend reality? What if you are not late to your purpose? You are exactly on time for a revolution. Only you can lead. What if time isn't passing? It's pressing. Pressing on your heart, pressing on your vision, pressing on your doubt, demanding that you choose creation over comfort. What if Einstein's true legacy wasn't that, the math, but the mindset? What if he left clues not to calculate, but to catalyze? What if relativity was just a door to remind us that reality is personal, and you are the architect? What if the reason we study him isn't because he solved problems, but because he refused to accept them? What if time bows to truth, and truth comes from those brave enough to ask the question no one else will? What if you are the next revolution, disguised as a normal life, waiting to turn one moment into a movement? What if the most important second of your life is always now? And what if Einstein lived every moment like it was the center of the universe? Because to him it was, and to you it can be. What if all you have to do is stop treating time like a thief and start treating it like a throne? Your stage, your fire, go get it. Reality wasn't fixed. What if everything you've ever accepted was simply unchallenged? What if the boundaries? And start treating it like a throne. Your stage, your fire. Go get it. Reality wasn't fixed. What if everything you've ever accepted was simply unchallenged? What if the boundaries of your life were only borders you never questioned? What if Einstein didn't just discover equations, he dismantled illusions? What if when they said, "This is how it is," he whispered, "But what if it's not?" What if truth isn't a destination, but a rebellion? And what if genius is not about answers, but the courage to ask different questions? What if reality is only solid because no one's been bold enough to shake it? What if Einstein didn't bend reality with numbers, but with refusal? Refusal to believe the rules, refusal to accept the limits, refusal to live in a box built by broken minds. What if the world told him it was over, and he just blinked and imagined a new one? What if every great thinker was a threat before they were a legend? What if you've been told to sit still when your destiny demands motion? What if Einstein's true power wasn't intellect, it was defiance? What if he didn't try to fit in because he knew he was designed to break out? What if every law he rewrote was a lie the world swallowed whole? What if when others saw gravity, he saw grace? When others saw time, he saw choice. When others saw space, he saw possibility. What if the cosmos opened because one man dared to challenge it, not with rage, but with relentless curiosity? What if you've been taught to stay small, to stay safe, to stay inside a map someone else drew? Moment you say, what if? Everything begins to shift. What if you're not here to adjust to reality? You're here to architect it. What if reality waits for the bold? What if the universe is liquid to those who are lucid? What if your mind is the lever and your will is the weight? What if you can pivot fate by pressing thought against fear? What if Einstein walked through doors we were too afraid to knock on? What if he lived in questions and danced in paradox? What if he built bridges where others built borders? What if his mind wasn't a machine? It was a mirror reflecting everything that could be, if only we believed. What if reality is scared of dreamers? Because dreamers make the static move. What if you are not here to obey what is, but to summon what could be? What if the only thing between you and the impossible is imagination on fire? What if your questions are more powerful than their answers? What if your why not is more dangerous than their because? What if the world doesn't fear your failure, it fears your freedom? Because a free thinker is a detonator, a creator, a liberator. What if Einstein's rise wasn't genius? It was grit. The grit to stand alone. The grit to doubt what they worshipped. The grit to think what they feared. What if you were born with that same spark, and all you need is to light it? What if truth isn't told, it's tested? What if certainty is a coffin, and wonder is a weapon? What if the world bends, not to facts, but to fire? And what if that fire lives in you, waiting for the day you choose courage over comfort? What if all your life you were told to color inside the lines, when you were born to shatter the canvas? What if Einstein didn't color differently? He burned the page and started again. What if you are not bound by reality? You are bonded to possibility. What if the universe is waiting for you to think one thought so big it cracks the shell of what's real and lets the future leak in? What if the only rule is there are no rules until you write them? What if destiny doesn't come to those who wait, but to those who wonder loud enough for the cosmos to answer? What if you are a storm disguised as silence, a genius disguised as doubt, a revolution disguised as routine? What if today you ask a question no one has dared to? And what if that question changes everything? Go get it. The universe isn't out there. What if it's in here? What if the stars aren't light years away, but thought years away? What if the speed of light is not a barrier, but an invitation? What if Einstein didn't just break equations, He opened dimensions. What if you don't chase dreams across the world, but awaken them within your own soul? What if the cosmos bows not to telescopes, but to fearless thought? What if you've been staring at the sky your whole life, when you should have been staring at the fire inside you? What if time is not a line, but a spiral, and you're standing in the eye of it? What if the future leaks backward, and the past listens forward? What if Einstein heard things we ignored? What if his silence spoke to space? What if his solitude was a secret door to the fabric of everything? What if you're not lost, you're layered? What if you're not behind, you're becoming? What if you are not supposed to understand it all just yet, because you are building the instruments of insight within yourself? What if you stop seeking approval and start chasing awe? What if your intuition knows more about physics than your textbooks ever will? What if Einstein unlocked the universe not because he was smarter, but because he dared to think in curves while the world thought in boxes? What if you could do that too? What if your mind isn't meant to memorize reality, but to mold it? What if imagination is not escape, it's entry? What if the impossible is just possibility with bad PR? What if you've been told the world is rigid, but it's actually rhythm? What if thought itself is energy and belief is gravity? What if every time you've doubted yourself, you were one idea away from bending the world to your design? What if you've underestimated how powerful a single idea can be? What if a whisper of curiosity is louder than a stadium of fear? What if you could stop time by immersing fully in the present? What if you don't need a telescope to see the stars? You need courage to become one. What if Einstein didn't teach us math? He taught us meaning. What if you stop solving life and start pretending it, composing it? What if reality is not built, it's interpreted, and you are the interpreter? What if every boundary is begging you to breach it? What if every formula is a fiction waiting to evolve? What if you are not a product of nature, but a programmer of nature? What if you are both the code and the coder? What if the universe is open source and your thoughts are commits to the system? What if your questions are algorithms that shift reality in real time? What if miracles are just misunderstood mechanics and genius is simply patience plus obsession? What if you stopped asking for signs and started being one? What if Einstein found the truth because he refused to settle for the obvious? What if the obvious is the enemy of greatness? What if the greatest truths feel strange before they feel real? What if doubt is a compass and discomfort is a portal? What if you are an undiscovered theory waiting for the right observer? What if the universe is not testing you, it's reflecting you? What if you could rewire your future by upgrading your thoughts? What if every fear is a signal not to flee, but to form? What if Einstein wasn't ahead of his time, but in sync with it in a way no one else was? What if you've been syncing with noise when you were made for the signal? What if the edge of understanding is where life actually begins? What if thinking differently isn't risky, it's required? What if certainty is the drug and confusion is the cure? What if genius is just the mastery of being lost? What if you stop trying to find answers and become the source of them? What if you are not a seeker of knowledge, but a sculptor of it? What if the deeper you go, the higher you rise? What if you are the event horizon and inside you is infinity? What if the way out is in and the way forward is inward? What if your future depends on how bravely you question the present? What if right now the universe is waiting for you to close your eyes and open the cosmos? Go get it. The invisible isn't imaginary. What if the things you can't see are the most real? What if genius is just faith weaponized? What if Einstein didn't believe in equations? He believed in whispers from the unknown. What if you don't have to see the finish line to start running? What if clarity is overrated and conviction is everything? What if the most powerful force in the universe isn't gravity, it's belief? What if the mind is just a gateway to dimensions the eyes can't process? What if every impossible dream you have is a seed, waiting for the friction of faith to bloom? What if every question you're afraid to ask is the doorway to your personal Big Bang? What if you were never meant to follow paths, but forge universes? What if Einstein saw the world not as it was, but as it could be, and then made it real by refusing to doubt his vision? What if doubt is just untrained faith? What if your wildest visions aren't fantasy, they're previews? What if you're not a reactor, you're a renderer, not a spectator, but a speaker into the code of reality? What if the reason the world hasn't changed is because you haven't spoken yet? What if silence isn't emptiness, but the moment before the symphony? What if your thoughts are blueprints and your words are hammers? What if you were created not to witness miracles, but to be one? What if Einstein wasn't trying to explain the universe, but to liberate it from small minds? What if you've been measuring life in numbers when it's written in frequencies? What if your purpose doesn't have a GPS because it's never been walked before? What if no one gets you because you're not here to be understood? You're here to be remembered. What if you stopped explaining your fire to people who sleep in rain? What if you stopped taming your roar for a world that thrives on silence? What if your heart is an antenna and your passion is the signal? What if the universe is always talking, but you've been taught to tune it out? What if genius is less about IQ and more about inner quiet? What if being misunderstood is proof you're on the edge? What if your job isn't to fit in, but to fractal out? What if Einstein wasn't smarter? He was braver. What if his real power was saying yes to ideas no one else dared to feel? What if thought is touch across dimensions? What if your dreams aren't yours? They're the universe requesting expression through you. What if reality is a mirror and your belief is the script behind the reflection? What if everything you've labeled a failure was a calibration? What if the things falling apart were never supposed to fit in your hands? What if every rejection was redirection? What if every delay was divine positioning? What if you've never lost time? You've only built depth. What if you stopped counting hours and started counting intensity? What if you realized a single moment of absolute alignment can bend years of chaos? What if Einstein didn't chase time? He transcended it. What if you could do the same? What if the faster you let go of certainty, the quicker truth finds you? What if your real identity isn't a name, but a rhythm? What if your greatest enemy isn't fear? It's forgetting who you are. What if the answers are hidden in the moments you rushed through? What if the most profound equations are written in silence, not chalk? What if imagination is not childish, but the highest discipline? What if the real test is whether you can believe before proof? What if faith is seeing with closed eyes and genius is trusting that sight? What if the invisible is your real home and everything you manifest is you visiting your own imagination? What if you're not here to survive, but to symphonize? What if you stopped being logical long enough to be limitless? What if logic is a ladder and wonder is a wormhole? What if you left the ladder behind and jumped into the vortex? What if the most intelligent thing you could do is feel deeper? What if Einstein's formulas were poetry? What if yours are too? What if your mind is the key, but your heart is the ignition? What if the universe only bends when you aligned? What if the only reason you haven't flown yet is because you're still asking if it's okay to take off? What if the wings are already there? You just haven't stopped doubting them. What if your genius isn't coming? It's waiting. What if this moment right now is the invitation? What if this is not the end of the story, but the start of awakening? What if you knew deep down that you weren't here to remember facts, but to reorder the stars? What if you were never meant to make sense? You were meant to make history. Go get it. What if time isn't moving forward? What if it's folding into you? What if every vision you have isn't a hope, it's a memory echoing backward? What if Einstein didn't discover relativity? He remembered it from somewhere beyond the veil. What if the future is whispering to you through desire, and you've mistaken it for fantasy? What if genius is the courage to trust a memory you haven't lived yet? What if your dreams are premonitions encrypted in your soul? What if your longing is a map and your actions are the ink that draws the road? What if you don't invent destiny? You just choose whether or not to respond to its pull. What if Einstein's brilliance came not from complexity, but from simplicity? From the boldness to believe the impossible might just be the obvious we've ignored. What if your intuition is more advanced than any data, and your gut feeling is more powerful than any formula? What if we're not just living in time, we're shaping it backwards? What if your thoughts are signals, not only sent out, but received from what already is? What if reality is a two-way mirror, and your imagination is how you communicate with your higher self? What if Einstein saw the world through different eyes? Not mystical ones, but aligned ones, synced to a rhythm most are too distracted to hear. What if silence is the key to unlocking universal resonance? What if you stopped chasing clarity and started tuning your frequency? What if every struggle is a sacred scramble meant to sharpen the signal of your soul? What if genius isn't knowing more, but feeling deeper? What if your emotions are not disruptions, they're directions? What if Einstein didn't wait for approval, he waited for alignment? What if that's all you've been missing? What if you stopped forcing and started flowing? What if intelligence isn't a ladder, but a spiral, and the only way forward is inward? What if remembering who you are is the highest form of advancement? What if the future needs you to believe in it before it can arrive? What if each idea you act on is a seed planted in reverse in the present? Soil of tomorrow. What if your actions echo across dimensions and belief is the bridge? What if the people who change the world aren't brave because they're fearless, but because they're faithful to what hasn't happened yet? What if Einstein wasn't alone in his thoughts, because he was always in dialogue with the infinite? What if you are too, but you've been calling it coincidence or doubt? What if signs are everywhere, and silence is the language of revelation? What if boredom is resistance to your higher calling? What if restlessness isn't lack of focus? It's a cosmic GPS saying, wrong turn, reroute, reroute. What if frustration is divine tension pulling you toward breakthrough? What if your life's delays are not setbacks, but recalibrations to position you for precision? What if you're not late? You're being loaded with deeper insight. What if nothing is wasted? Not even your questions. What if genius is cultivated in confusion and grown in the dark like roots? What if you're growing right now and you can't feel it because your transformation isn't loud? What if the most powerful shifts happen in whispers? What if your becoming is not a moment, but a momentum? What if Einstein knew that stillness isn't weakness? It's alignment with universal timing. What if all you need to do is tune in? What if your next idea will not come from striving, but surrender? What if your intelligence is throttled by fear and unlocked by flow? What if the future is trying to meet you, but you've been showing up as someone else? What if all it's waiting for is your real self to arrive? What if the greatest thing you could do today is believe you already have it? What if it's done and your belief collapses? Time to make it now. What if Einstein's real genius wasn't understanding light, but becoming light? What if you could too? What if your light is waiting behind the fear of being seen? What if your greatness is waiting behind the wall of trying to be accepted? What if the key to your next level is to stop dimming down? What if power doesn't roar, it radiates? What if you were never meant to fit into the system because you were born to redesign it? What if we've mistaken obedience for intelligence and conformity for genius? What if the ones who change the world never ask for permission? What if you stopped asking and started becoming? What if becoming isn't an act, but an awakening? What if you're already it, and your job is just to clear the fog? What if the fog is your fear, and the light is your fire? What if the only distance between your dream and your reality is the lie that you're not ready? What if you've always been ready, and this is the moment to act? What if you stopped scrolling through inspiration and started embodying it? What if you stopped collecting knowledge and started expressing wisdom? What if the truth isn't something you find, it's something you become? What if Einstein saw through illusion because he trusted inner vision? What if your real vision isn't with eyes, it's with your will? What if your will is divine energy concentrated through choice? What if this is the moment you choose to awaken? What if this is your cosmic yes? What if this isn't just a video? This is a portal. What if your story starts now? Go get it. The line between madness and genius was not a boundary, but a launch pad. What if the wildest thoughts were the most sacred? What if imagination is the language of the divine, and curiosity is its messenger? What if Albert Einstein wasn't trying to be smart? He was trying to stay wild. What if his brilliance was birthed from chaos and tamed by intention? What if your greatest ideas are hidden behind your fear of sounding crazy? What if crazy is code for unfiltered genius? What if your job isn't to make sense, it's to make impact? What if logic is just a filter and you're trying to shine through a lens that dims you? If society taught you to shrink and Einstein taught us to expand, what if the world isn't changed by those who follow it, but by those who confuse it at first? What if questions are more powerful than answers? Because questions keep you open, and answers close the loop. What if asking why again and again is a spiritual practice? What if you stopped trying to be right and started trying to be real? What if authenticity is the mother of all genius? What if pretending is the true insanity and expressing is the cure? What if Einstein's hair wasn't wild, it was honest, a reflection of a mind too busy exploring galaxies to comb convention? What if genius doesn't wear a suit, it wears soul? What if your inner Einstein is dying to escape the cage of compliance? What if your weirdness is your weapon? What if your mind isn't broken, it's just bursting? What if your sensitivity is your gift, not your flaw? What if being overwhelmed is a sign of underexpression? What if your brilliance is bottled behind fear? What if fear is just feedback telling you where the gold is? What if your resistance points to your next revelation? What if breaking down is the first step to breaking through? What if everything falling apart is just the false layers peeling away? What if rock bottom is a portal, not a prison? What if genius rises when everything else falls? What if you've been trying to climb ladders that lead nowhere, and it's time to build wings? What if rules are suggestions for the uninspired? What if the genius path has no trail because you're meant to blaze it? What if your compass is your chaos? What if confusion is proof you're leaving the old matrix? What if peace isn't found in answers, but in alignment with your mission? What if your obsession is your direction? What if you weren't meant to balance, but to burn? What if fire is how genius moves? What if Einstein didn't calculate his breakthroughs? He collided with them. What if creativity isn't born, it's detonated? What if you're a ticking time bomb of brilliance? What if the only thing stopping you is containment? What if your cage is made of good advice and safe opinions? What if playing small is the real danger? What if every second spent hiding is a betrayal of your birthright? What if expression is your highest form of service? What if your pain is sacred because it points to the place where your gift is buried? What if genius doesn't come from textbooks, but from tension, from discomfort, from spiritual friction? What if all growth is violent to the old version of you? What if evolution is destruction followed by design? What if you've been too polite to become powerful? What if disruption is divine? What if your mind isn't here to conform? It's here to collapse illusions. What if the only approval you need is from the future you who did it anyway? What if you're not late? You're legendary. And preparing takes longer when the mission is massive. What if your destiny requires downtime? What if quiet seasons are sacred training grounds for those called to shatter ceilings? What if the longer it takes, the louder it echoes? What if Einstein had quit because people didn't get it yet? What if your silence is robbing the world of a new frequency? What if sound creates matter, and your voice could reshape realities? What if speaking up is the beginning of space bending? What if words are spells, and you're a walking incantation? What if the more you express, the clearer the signal gets? What if your doubt is a signal that you're stepping into new dimensions? What if shaking isn't the sign of weakness, it's the tremor before transformation? What if your next level is locked behind your last hesitation? What if today is the moment you stop holding back and start holding on to belief? What if you looked crazy now and iconic later? What if the world catches up only after you commit? What if true genius is lonely at first because it walks where others haven't dared? What if you stop waiting for applause and started listening to the roar inside? What if madness is misunderstood clarity? What if your mind isn't broken? It's bilingual, speaking a truth this world hasn't yet translated. What if you're not here to fit in? You're here to format the future. What if this is your permission slip to go all in, to go beyond, to go get it? What if silence was the laboratory of the gods? What if solitude was the sculptor of genius? What if Albert Einstein didn't discover in noise, but in stillness? What if the most powerful equations were whispered in the quiet? What if your next breakthrough isn't in more information, but in deeper reflection? What if every great idea was born in the void? What if space isn't empty, it's pregnant with power? What if your mind needs stillness the way lungs need air? What if noise is not your environment, it's your enemy? What if true clarity comes when the world fades and only the truth remains? What if being alone isn't loneliness, it's leadership? What if isolation is a sanctuary, not a sentence? What if the world avoids silence because silence exposes everything? What if you fear being alone because that's where the real work begins? What if your destiny is waiting in the places you avoid? What if the genius you admire was built in moments you run from? What if time with yourself is time with the source? What if Einstein's greatest discoveries weren't made in conversation, but in contemplation? What if you're ... If your imagination needs silence to ignite, what if your mind is too crowded to receive the download? What if inspiration isn't summoned, it's heard? What if the reason you feel stuck is because you're surrounded? What if elevation requires separation? What if growth is a solitary sport? What if the genius path is walked alone before it's celebrated publicly? What if the next level of your life requires the loss of your comfort crew? What if solitude is the sharpening before the showing? What if you're trying to get seen before you're refined? What if success isn't hiding from you, it's hidden in your schedule? What if you started treating alone time like sacred time? What if you booked silence like an appointment with destiny? What if your calendar reflects your commitment to chaos, not creation? What if solitude is your greatest asset and distraction your greatest liability? What if the true test of genius is how long you can sit with yourself without reaching for a screen? What if everything you're searching for is inside you, but you keep outsourcing? What if thinking is a lost art and stillness is the new frontier? What if you stopped trying to keep up and started slowing down? What if momentum comes from alignment, not movement? What if genius isn't fast, it's focused? What if Einstein was a time traveler, not because he bent space, but because he mastered presence? What if presence is the real superpower? What if your inability to sit still is a symptom of spiritual starvation? What if stillness feeds you more than any scroll ever could? What if your spirit is screaming and you can't hear it over the algorithm? What if silence is the sound of your soul speaking? What if the universe only whispers to those who are listening? What if intuition isn't rare? It's just buried under noise. What if your hunches are holy? What if your gut is God in disguise? What if you don't need answers, you need awareness? What if insight comes after isolation? What if you've been too connected to create? What if solitude is how you return to source? What if disconnecting is how you realign? What if being alone isn't punishment, it's preparation? What if the hermit is the hero in disguise? What if you're in the cocoon, not the cage? What if stillness is your metamorphosis? What if you're becoming something bigger than this world can measure? What if you need to shrink your circle to expand your vision? What if silence is not the absence of sound, it's the presence of self? What if you're not lost, you're incubating? What if the most misunderstood phase is the most necessary? What if the seed feels buried, but it's actually planted? What if roots grow in darkness? What if your genius is sprouting in silence? What if Albert Einstein didn't rush? He waited, he listened, he wandered. What if wandering is wisdom without a map? What if the unknown is the invitation, not the obstacle? What if solitude teaches you who you are before the world tries to define you? What if self-discovery is the curriculum of genius? What if you started observing your thoughts instead of escaping them? What if inner peace is the canvas and ideas are the brush? What if mental space creates masterpieces? What if your breakthrough depends on your ability to retreat? What if your mind is not a battleground, but a temple, and silence is its ritual? What if genius is less about IQ and more about inner quiet? What if your intelligence is drowned in constant engagement? What if stillness is the frequency where brilliance downloads? What if the future belongs to the focused, not the frantic? What if the most radical thing you can do is unplug? What if disconnection is the detox your destiny needs? What if attention is your greatest currency and stillness is how you invest it? What if the answers are already inside, but you've been asking the world instead? What if silence is sacred and waiting is powerful? What if genius isn't lightning, it's a lighthouse? What if you are the storm and the stillness, and it's time to return to your source and go get it? What if the greatest technology you'll ever own is your mind? What if Albert Einstein wasn't just a physicist, but a prophet of possibility? What if imagination is the blueprint of all reality? What if thoughts are not passive, they're architectural? What if your inner world builds your outer world? What if reality bends to belief? What if the universe is responding not to what you do, but to what you imagine? What if every vision is a seed, and your mind is the soil? What if imagination is the blueprint, key that unlocks dimensions? What if your brain is the portal to parallel realities? What if Einstein understood this before the world caught up? What if time and space are not limits, but illusions? What if you are a creator disguised as a dreamer? What if your fantasy is more factual than your fears? What if energy follows intention and your dreams are already on the way? What if your imagination is the most underused power you possess? What if you've been trained to shrink instead of expand? What if society rewarded logic, but the universe rewards vision? What if your job isn't to figure it out, but to feel it first? What if emotion is the fuel of creation? What if every time you imagine your future, you're shifting timelines? What if imagination isn't escape, it's evolution? What if Einstein tapped into this field, not with his eyes, but with his mind? What if the mind is more real than matter? What if your reality is a mirror of your mental movie? What if everything you see was once unseen? What if the most powerful things in this world are invisible? What if thought is the genesis of every invention, every revolution, every miracle? What if the invisible creates the visible? What if you've been living backwards, trying to fix the outside before forming the inside? What if the secret isn't action first, but vision first? What if imagination is rehearsal for reality? What if Einstein imagined bending time before anyone understood time at all? What if he traveled with thought before rockets existed? What if your brain is a spaceship, your thoughts the fuel, your belief the coordinates? What if imagination is the language of God and dreams are the echoes of the divine? What if fantasy is a preview, not a distraction? What if dreaming isn't sleeping, it's summoning? What if when you close your eyes, the universe opens its gates? What if you saw your visions, not as wishes, but instructions? What if imagination isn't optional, it's essential? What if you're not limited by what's real, but by what you believe is possible? What if belief is the bridge between now and next? What if faith is imagination with certainty? What if you began living as if your future is already real? What if quantum physics and scripture agree that you become what you believe? What if imagining your best life is the most powerful prayer? What if visualization is creation? What if Einstein proved God doesn't play dice, and neither should you? What if randomness is an illusion and focus is your power? What if you can't see the path because you haven't imagined the destination? What if clarity comes after conception? What if you've been trying to walk a road that only appears after faith? What if the map is inside you? What if your imagination draws it step by step? What if the only distance between you and destiny is the space between your ears? What if you began to dream again, like you did as a child before the world taught you fear? What if the only limitation left is disbelief? What if you unlearned their boundaries and reimagined your birthright? What if miracles are normal and imagination is the mechanism? What if nothing is too big if it can fit in your thoughts? What if the universe is listening, not to your words, but your inner world? What if you've been given a canvas and called it a cage? What if your mind is not just a tool, it's a temple? What if creation starts at conception and conception starts in thought? What if your imagination is sacred and your doubt is the only sin? What if belief is obedience to your higher self? What if every genius was once a misunderstood dreamer? What if Albert Einstein had given up on his thoughts because they sounded too strange? What if you've been told to be realistic by people who never built reality? What if dreaming is dangerous to the system, but vital to your soul? What if every breakthrough started as a breakdown in normal thinking? If imagination destroys boxes and creates galaxies, what if you're here to build what's never been seen? What if God gives visions to those willing to imagine? What if the future is for the bold and the dreamers are the architects? What if you stopped treating your dreams like decorations and started living them like directions? What if imagination isn't a gift, it's a command? What if your mind is not broken, it's brilliant, and not just a tool, it's a temple? What if creation starts at conception and conception starts in thought? What if your imagination is sacred and your doubt is the only sin? What if belief is obedience to your higher self? What if every genius was once a misunderstood dreamer? What if Albert Einstein had given up on his thoughts because they sounded too strange? What if you've been told to be realistic by people who never built reality? What if dreaming is dangerous to the system, but vital to your soul? What if every breakthrough started as a breakdown in normal thinking? If imagination destroys boxes and creates galaxies? What if you're here to build what's never been seen? What if God gives visions to those willing to imagine? What if the future is for the bold and the dreamers are the architects? What if you stopped treating your dreams like decorations and started living them like directions? What if imagination isn't a gift, it's a command? What if your mind is not broken, it's brilliant, and it's waiting for permission to unleash? What if you turned your daydreams into declarations? What if you designed your life like Einstein designed his theories, in mental blueprints, before math ever touched them? What if you're the creator, not the consequence? What if you stopped waiting for proof and started living with power? What if the most logical thing you can do is be irrationally faithful to your imagination? What if the world doesn't need more workers? It needs more visionaries. What if your thoughts are seeds and your belief is sunlight? What if you cultivated your dreams like a scientist, like a sculptor, like a sacred ritual? What if today you chose to dream again, to build again, to believe again, and go get it? What if you were the living proof that Einstein's theories weren't just physics, but prophecy? What if you were the equation he never wrote, the formula not of matter, but of mindset? What if you are energy in motion, a frequency of unstoppable belief? What if everything you've overcome has been shaping you into the hypothesis that reality bends to will? What if your life is the lab and your soul the scientist? What if you were designed not to exist in logic, but to explode into limitlessness? What if you are the wild experiment of divine ambition? What if Einstein's greatest discovery wasn't relativity, but revelation? The realization that genius isn't born, it's chosen. What if you are the chosen, the one bold enough to step into the unknown and scream, "I am ready"? What if the speed of light isn't fast enough to catch what you're about to become? What if you are becoming faster than time? What if belief collapses dimensions and your destiny is already written in quantum ink? What if you were the paradox Einstein predicted, the rebel with a reason, the storm with structure? What if your mind is made of galaxies and your thoughts are made of lightning? What if the fire inside you was born from stars? What if your spirit is older than fear and louder than failure? What if you were born to defy gravity, rise above limits, and carry the weight of possibility? What if your dreams don't require explanation, only execution? What if you are the anomaly, the phenomenon, the miracle in motion? What if the universe has been waiting for you to awaken into who you've always been? What if every struggle was a code, every setback a calculation, preparing the equation for breakthrough? What if the sum of your pain equals the magnitude of your purpose? What if you are not a mistake, but mathematics divinely miscalculated by man and perfectly written by God? What if your silence is where the formulas are written? What if every time you dared to believe, you created energy no equation could measure? What if faith is faster than photons and belief is brighter than stars? What if every neuron in your brain is a vote for your future? What if you stop doubting your intelligence and start defining your impact? What if the greatest minds weren't smarter, just more daring? What if genius is less about IQ and more about relentless curiosity? What if you stay curious and you become infinite? What if Einstein's real message was not E equals MC squared, but U equals limitless squared? What if you are not supposed to fit in, but redefine the system? What if your thoughts are not random, but sacred transmissions from your higher self? What if every desire is a divine clue and every calling is a cosmic contract? What if you honored that contract with commitment? What if you stopped asking how and started asking now? What if you are the answer to every question you've been afraid to ask? What if today is the day you realize you are your own revolution? What if you didn't need more knowledge? You needed more nerve. What if your courage is your greatest calculation? What if faith is the formula that rewrites failure? What if you believe in yourself like Einstein, believed in ideas that made no sense to anyone else until they changed everything? What if your madness is the portal to genius, and your chaos the chemistry of greatness? What if you were never meant to be normal, but nuclear? What if your thinking could detonate stagnation and create galaxies of success? What if you've been waiting to be discovered when you were designed to self-ignite? What if the fire inside you is your only permission slip? What if the world doesn't need another copy? It needs the original blueprint that is you. What if you lived so boldly your life became a formula others studied? What if your scars are equations that calculate courage? What if your tears are formulas that prove strength? What if your smile is the solution the world has been waiting for? What if Einstein's vision lives on through your audacity? What if you dared to become the conclusion of his unsolved genius? What if every obstacle you face is just gravity daring you to fly? What if your mind is a black hole? Black holes swallowing limits and spitting out stars. What if you stopped shrinking into probability and started expanding into power? What if you treated your thoughts like inventions and your life like a theory in motion? What if you ran your life like a lab, where failure isn't fatal but formulaic? What if your mess is the math that births miracles? What if your doubts are the dark matter that holds your dreams together? What if you've only scratched the surface of your soul's science? What if you knew that being misunderstood is a measurement of how far you're stretching the laws of reality? What if every second you spend believing in yourself is a vibration added to the frequency of breakthrough? What if you can feel it now? The shift, the crackling of the atmosphere around your destiny. What if Einstein is watching, not from a grave, but from the other side of time, applauding your evolution? What if this was never about physics, but about fire, the internal combustion of becoming something no one predicted? What if you are the theory turned real, the math turned miracle, the dream turned destiny? What if you stopped waiting and started becoming? What if now is the only number that matters? What if go get it isn't a motto, it's your moment?